My guest today is someone that has been in the news a lot lately. Arkansas's state senator, Miss Joyce Elliott, who is running for Congress against incumbent U.S. Representative Mr. French Hill. In Stephanie Smittle's Arkansas Times article titled, "From Willisville to Washington, Senator Joyce Elliott is ready to school Congress," Stephanie writes, if elected, Joyce Elliott will be the first black lawmaker Arkansas has ever sent to Congress. Joyce, is that right?
Yes, that is right.
Wow.
A lot of people are confused. They're confused by it because during Reconstruction there were black lawmakers in the state, but we're the only one of our former Confederate states that's not done so. That is right.
I was surprised to hear that. That's why I cited it as her, because I thought, I don't know if that's true or not.
It surprises a lot of people,
Yeah, that clever Arkansas Times title is a play on words for Miss Elliott's previous career as a high school teacher. And though race may arguably no longer matter at getting ahead in America, for we just had a black president, the highest office in the land, it has played a large role in Miss Elliott's life. Young Joyce was born in a small Arkansas town in the 1950s and schooled during the height of our country's desegregation. Feeling it her duty, though hard, she and her sister Caroline acquiesced and volunteered to be the token black students at a somewhat hostile and all-white high school. This experience, along with coming of age during John F. Kennedy's term as president, instilled a hopeful, thoughtful life of duty, service, education for all, and gave Miss Elliott the toughness that is needed in today's politics. It is with great pleasure to welcome to the table the smart, civic-minded, and as her friends and colleagues call her, the workhorse, Senator Joyce Holt.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure, I know, to be here, and I'm looking forward to our talk.
Thank you very much, Joyce, for coming. I want to tell everybody that's listening that usually we meet in the studio together with my guests, and you and I had planned to do that, but yesterday, everybody at the state capitol, I believe it was exposed to COVID, and everyone is quarantining. So you and I are doing a radio phone-in call, and we're not actually together live, and we're going to try to not talk over each other. But thank you so much for joining me. Well, I want to start off by saying, well, it's a good thing you're tough, because just this week the ads against you from your opponent, or maybe I should rightly say from the Republican Party, have been vicious. How do you handle that?
It has been surprisingly vicious because I just never knew French Hill as this person, and it kind of goes back, and much of what you said in the introduction for me, because when I chose to remain at a school where we were told to our faces, the kids there were 3 or 4 other families that were at the school, and after we had integrated the school, we were told that we could go back to our old black school. And we were expected to do so. And I just, some little voice in me just telling me, no, it is not the right thing to do, that somebody had to take a stand. So here we were in the midst of this room, and these men are telling us we can go back. And I just blurted out, I'm not going. And immediately became as scared as heck and hot all over because this little voice inside me was causing me to take a stand about something I thought was wrong. And so that's where I got my toughness, I guess, for even taking some of the things that are happening now. Because being that 15-year-old girl and integrating the school was not easy by any stretch of the imagination. And I might remind you, we actually started early compared to most schools in our state. Because, after Hoxie and Charleston and Central High, most other people just waited around for a while. And this was 1966 when we started. And most of the schools didn't really get serious about integrating until the 70s.
I didn't realize that there was this big gap between the 1957 Central High desegregation and then these smaller towns waiting 5, 6, 7 years before they integrated. You were also, you also, in making that decision, gave up your valedictorian position. You were slated to be the valedictorian of Oak Grove High School, mostly black school. And when you chose to go to Willisville High and be a part of this integration, you lost scholarships. You lost your valedictorian status.
I did. And we, like a lot of people, it was not unusual. We were poor. We grew up in Willisville, Arkansas, population 152, down in the Southwest. But the one thing I wanted to do, I really wanted to go to college. And, you know, I read everything I could get my hands on. So I knew about the world out there. And I knew the way that I could get into that world was, I figured, was through an education. And like a lot of other people, you know, who had gone to the school that I went to, Oak Grove, you got a scholarship to an HBCU. In this case, it would have been UAPB. And when I went to that school, I was, you know, it became very evident early on that I was not going to be the valedictorian. And not only was I not going to be, Terry, I was slated to make sure that I did not become the valedictorian. But those same two men who met with us to tell us to go back to school had a private meeting with me, had my transcript, and it was the first time I'd ever had any kind of reaction to being a good student and having good grades that was not positive. And they questioned my transcript and asked where I got those grades and assured me, you would not get these here. And I didn't know, this is a long story, but I want to make it short. I didn't know at the same time the young man who was who was the putative or the assumed valedictorian had been told, that had been brought into that meeting and told that I had really good grades, and if he wanted to be the valedictorian, he needed to do something about, you know, Joyce Elliott.
Wow.
And he
you're used to competition, so I guess you're used to competition. So
the good thing about it, the good thing about it, though, the other thing I'm used to, too, is not holding a grudge. Because at this, I mean, he and I had reconciled many years ago. And that really became, you know, one of my finest examples of bringing people together. Because I just, since I was that 15-year-old, I just knew there had to be a better way. So I've just kind of been on this unity tour throughout my whole life. And that's why, you know, at the legislature, and they'll tell you, Democrat or Republican, I work with everybody. Because I don't think we have to give in to Washington has to be this way or it is this way. We can do better than this. It's hard work. There's no doubt about that.
I was lucky enough to get to interview Sybil Hampton, who was the second class to integrate Central High School, and she said that she went through a year of vetting and interviews to make sure that she was tough enough, that she was a tough enough teenager to handle the hostile environment at Central High School. Did you have to go through anything like that?
I didn't go through any kind of vetting because decisions were made that I don't even know all of the background and how they were made. Because in Nevada County was where I was. There was the upper part in Prescott. There was an all-black school there, and I was in the lower part. And there was an all-black school in Roston, Arkansas, where the place was. And when we were ordered to integrate, I guess the school board or whoever just decided that these 5 or 6 families, because there were about 5 all-white schools, these 5 or 6 families will go to this school, and this 5 or 6 will go to that school, until all of the all-white schools were integrated with a few black students. And not a single white student had to move or do anything.
Right.
And not a single white student was sent to the previously all-black school that was still there. And that inspired me about, you know, being a public school teacher.
Right.
I needed that.
At an early age, you read the newspaper. How did you I think that's really odd because that's just not a thing that young people do. But you read about President JFK. How did reading about him affect your view of the world?
My grandmother was an avid reader of the newspaper, and keep in mind, I'm in Southwest Arkansas. We're close to Louisiana, and we're getting Louisiana politics. And you had to be just out of your mind not to be interested in those stories. And so, for the one thing, it was just, you know, it was compelling. And the rest of my members of my family read the comics, and I just want the news stories. But this was at a time, you know, when John F. Kennedy was running for office, There was lots and lots of coverage, during that time, and I read every bit of it. And the thing that inspired me about it more than anything, for the first time ever, I heard my elders around me talk out loud about politics and talk out loud about voting. Because every time I've heard them talking about voting, I would hear the term poll taxes, but I didn't know what it meant. But they started saying it out loud, and I realized that this man was something special to people. And the first time I realized somebody in politics could give somebody hope, because they thought life was going to be much, much better because just one man was being elected. And that's kind of when I got the political bug. I thought, one of these days, I don't care what this is, I'm going to do this.
How old were you?
I was about 9 or 10.
What?
Yeah.
What's a poll tax? What's a poll tax mean? You heard about poll taxes?
Yeah, what I heard about I knew when they were whispering about it. I knew the poll tax meant something that was not pleasant, and I knew they had to pay for it. But the poll tax literally meant you had to buy this piece of paper, to present when you went to vote. It was one of the ways of suppressing the vote, because so many people did not have that 50 cents or 15 cents or whatever it took. But you had to go even worse than that. You had to go someplace that was not where you would get questioned about. Why do you need it? Why do you need, a piece of paper or a poll?
You had to buy your tax piece of paper. You had to buy a piece of paper to vote.
Yes. And that's why it was called a tax.
I got you.
You had to have that piece of paper to present. Yeah.
All right. This is a great place to. Yeah. This is that. Yeah. I didn't realize that. This is a great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Arkansas Senator Miss Joyce Elliott, who is running for U.S. Representative in Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District against incumbent Mr. French Hill. Still to come, how does being a teacher prepare you for politics? What motivated Miss Elliott to run for office? And what it's like to be a kidney donor to her sister. And if we have time, I'm going to ask her about her fashion sense, her signature hairstyle, and her jewelry. We'll be back after the break. You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy, and I'm speaking today with Arkansas Senator Miss Joyce Elliott, who's running for U.S. Representative in Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District against incumbent Mr. French Hill. Before the break, we talked about Joyce Elliott being, I don't know, what do we talk about her being a trendsetter, a goal setter. She was one of the first high school kids to
highly motivated.
She started reading the paper when she was 9 years old and wanted to go into politics. She integrated her school in Willisville, Arkansas, and now we're going to talk about her roots in Arkansas. Miss Elliott, your uncle wanted you to go out of state to college, but you didn't. You taught in Boston, Texas. Eventually, you did follow your husband's career to Tampa, Florida. In the mid '70s, you came back to teach in El Dorado, Arkansas, and then eventually ended up teaching 20 years at Joe T. Robinson in Little Rock. You are smart, have done a lot, could probably do anything you wanted to do. What 9-year-old reads a newspaper? But after such a tumultuous high school experience, you chose teaching as a profession, as your profession. Why would you want to go back to a place that was so tough?
Because I knew it shouldn't be that tough, especially for kids. And one of the things that, as I indicated earlier, I didn't have money to go to college, and I'd lost that scholarship, so I had to figure out a way to work and pay for college and so forth. And when my uncle, that was hard to turn down. He was the one in the family who had done well. And I'll tell you, the thing that made it the hardest of all is when he said, if you'll just come to Michigan and go to school, I'll buy your car. We never even had a car in our family. But at any rate, what I had determined, for me, Dr. King and all he was doing and so many civil rights workers, that was a real thing for me. I read about these people in real time. I never saw him, but I read about the things that were happening in real time, and I could see the same things that he was talking about and that we'd see in the newspaper and occasionally on the TV if I was in somebody else's home. And I just knew what I was supposed to do to make my contribution. And I'm not critical of it. I never judged it. My sister left Arkansas. Others left Arkansas. But my thinking was somebody has to stay here and take a stand to change this. And if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And so that's why I decided to stay and I was never one to ask others to do what I want to do if I can. And my thinking was, what if I just went off to Atlanta, to Dallas, or Chicago, where things, not that they were perfect, but where things are already in good shape, so to speak. And I couldn't figure out what my contribution was going to be there. And I just knew it needed to be right here in the red dirt of South Arkansas, or in Arkansas, period.
In the red dirt.
That's why I stayed.
You taught for 30 years, and did you teach the same subject, literature, the whole time?
I taught literature, and I taught speech and communication, part of which included speech correction. And I loved it. I loved my teaching career. I taught senior high students, and that was, as they say, that was my jam. I was not good, with the smaller kids. I knew that, but I wanted to teach high school, and it was a wonderful.
You had some pretty impressive students you taught that grew up to do some pretty good things. Representative Johnny Roebuck, Representative Frederick Love, City Manager Bruce Moore. Those were all your students.
Yeah. Representative Johnny Roebuck is the only one who was not. She was one of the ones I think he was featured. But Representative Love, Representative Love was one of my students. Andy Davis was one of my students. Representative Andy Davis, and as a matter of fact, I called them my bipartisan students because one was a Democrat, one was a Republican, which was just great. One was black, one was white. But I think that was just so symbolic of the way I lived my life. And when I taught, kids, I always tried to get them to think for themselves, challenge, but think for yourself, and to get an opportunity, think about this, to serve with two of my former students. That's really special. And of course, Bruce Moore was one of my students as well, and many other people, right here in the, in the area. But yeah, when you teach that long, you start seeing your students pretty quickly.
That's a great testament to your ability to teach. While teaching, some of the things you worked on, you were co-lead in the Classroom Teachers Association to get students from El Dorado access to advanced placement courses. You developed a teacher-to-teacher development workshop. You collaborated on legislation that helped college students retain credits when transferring institution and held universities accountable for low graduation rates. And you advocated for 1987 National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. This is a volunteer teacher certificate with financial incentive. And then you took a 2-year hiatus to serve as the president of Pulaski County National Education Association. Some of your co-workers have said they are surprised you didn't go into to work in the public sector sooner. How did being a teacher prepare you for going into that service, and why did you stay a teacher for 30 years along with all that other you did?
One, because every every day, you walk into the classroom and you're going to make a difference, unless you're just a vegetable or something, you are. And it was what I wanted to do from the bottom of my heart, and it just was so rewarding. And I loved being around those students, and it just kept me energized all the time, and the learning was so fantastic. But the one thing that's really true is I always had a very diverse group of students. And when you think about teaching and being prepared to go into the public sector, especially as a legislator, there are so many parallels here. I tell all teachers, if you have really done a good job of teaching, I promise you're prepared for the legislature. Because what you have to do is work with all kind of attitudes, all kind of parents. It's a very diverse place where not everybody's on the same page all the time, literally. And you have to figure out a way to be that person to work with all those kids, no matter what their income was, no matter what their color was, no matter, what their learning styles were. And that is the thing that really has helped me so much in the legislature, because we are the same kind of thing, except I always tell my legislative friends, the kids, caught on a whole lot better until let's get together, work together, the way things are some now. But because I did that, it was being a bipartisan working legislator just came naturally for me. And when I was in the legislature, I worked with Governor Huckabee, I worked with Governor Beebe, and it was not ever an issue of whether or not I was going to work with somebody just because they were Democrat, or I'm not going to work with somebody because they're Republican. Because I had taught all those different kind of things.
How do you feel about the current changes to our public and private schools in Arkansas right now? I've seen you on TV, even though you and I are not personal acquaintances. I've seen you on TV forever, and I've seen you at some press conferences, and I heard you say you may punish Little Rock, and I'm quoting, I think, you may punish Little Rock by closing schools and taking over the district, but 5 or 10 years from now, what's going to be different if we are not looking at the source from which all the problems come from? What do you think's wrong right now? What is wrong right now with the Arkansas schools?
Well, what I was referring to then is the State Board of Education had taken over schools because of test scores. And that is, I know a lot of people think that makes sense, but it doesn't, because you don't learn that much in a test score. But as long as we can predict, and these are the things I'm talking about that we don't pay attention to, as long as we can predict that a child is probably going to have a low test score or not do as well as you or I might think they should because of where they live in this city, as long as that is the case, or as long as their income determines what they're going to be making on that test score and the opportunities they have, if we don't address these kind of things, what I was referring to, rather than taking what I think is the lazy way out and just saying it's going to be determined on the test score. Because at the same time, the state board, I guess, thought they were doing well. What they did was destabilize communities by closing schools. I was never able to my satisfaction, at least, get people to understand you're making a judgment based on one simple thing. And on the one hand, you say you kind of know why it's that way because of all the inequities. But we are not addressing the inequities. We're addressing the outcome.
Oh, I agree.
Without thinking about changing the inputs.
I think that's the way. Yeah, I think that's the way everybody solves problems. Is they look at the end results and they start trying to fix the problem at the end instead of going to the source of the problem. So these kids.
That's right.
When I read that about you, I thought, oh, we have the same philosophy on go to the source of the problem. Don't go in and try to fix.
That's right.
So dyslexia, I noticed you got testing for dyslexia. I'm dyslexic, and I could never have had a good test score no matter what. I mean, just the idea of sitting down and they hand you the test, I broke out into a cold sweat because you were timed.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so I saw you enacted, and maybe with Governor Huckabee you did this, I'm not sure, but enacted something for dyslexia kids, is that right?
That was with Governor Hutchinson, actually. Yeah, 2013. Yeah, Governor Hutchinson. Because when I taught all those years, I had students that there was nothing wrong with their brains, and I would see them struggle, and I did not know what to do to help them except, try to take time to do things verbally and so forth, which was not sustainable. And it just bothered me so much that I figured it was probably dyslexia, some other kind of reading problem, obviously. But when I got a chance to do the research and had a chance in the legislature to do something about it, I did. So in 2011 was the first time I introduced the bill. Was not successful in 2011 because it just took a whole lot more research I needed to do and creating more and more allies. And one of the allies that I ended up working with was Johnny Key, who is now, the Secretary of Education. And once again, it was me as a Democrat, him as a Republican, but we both cared about this. And it just wasn't a Democratic-Republican issue. And because when we passed it in the Senate, it passed with no dissenting votes. And so it has changed the lives of, hundreds, I would guess even thousands of kids in our state now. And it's one of the pieces of legislation that's being looked at across the country for what we did to address that issue.
Congratulations. How frustrating is it to have to start in 2011, and here it is 2019, before you actually get something done? That would drive me crazy.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, too. That's one of the things I really got from teaching, as having the patience of Job, because you don't, you cannot, like if I had a kid who was struggling because they didn't get it the first time, I had to go back and go back and go back again. So it's just a skill I developed. And because I just almost never, when I approach legislation, to me, it needs to be something profoundly important. And if I have to keep working at it, I will keep working at it.
Was there something that just happened one day around 2000 and I think it was 2000 when you first ran for office, around the year 2000, where you just thought, okay, it's time for me to run for public office now? Was there some defining moment?
Well, actually, yeah, because like I said, when I was 9 or 10 years old in the fourth grade, I remember getting to fourth grade during that time. When I knew for sure I wanted to do this, I was actually waiting for my son to finish high school, and my son finished high school in 1998. And it would be 2 years later before there would be, I would have an opportunity to run. But as soon as those 2 years were over, this is just the time. It was not a one-off thing. It was something I always knew I was committed to doing. Speaking of patience, yes.
Well, you worked your first 2 terms. You taught while you were also a representative of your first 2 terms, and then
I did. Because it was, the pay was just so low. I had to keep teaching, and when I went to the legislature, I had to take leave without pay, and it was just living paycheck to paycheck. I felt like I was back in my childhood days. It was that hard, and so when the session was over, I had to go back to teaching. But this was the time that. We also got into all of the Lakeview discussions, and that started to consume a whole lot of all of our time.
What's the Lakeview? What's the Lakeview discussions?
It was a Lakeview desegregation case that required the courts found the state out of compliance with the Constitution to make sure all kids had an equitable and efficient education.
That's what Judge Bob Brown was talking about on our interview 2 weeks ago that he created legislature about. Yeah. So speaking about your unity tour, how your life has been a unity tour, part of your campaigning after school was with your ex-husband, Bill Barnes. He's in your corner.
I would go to school and work by day, and I would campaign in the afternoon. And the guys that were running, there were 4 guys, I think, originally. Then it ended up being 3. And I think they had a little bit more time, and I was just so determined because I remember what it felt like being a girl and not getting to. I was a good athlete, not getting to play basketball. I got a basketball scholarship when I got out of high school because then we didn't have Title IX. And so I just said, I will work as hard as I must, but I will not be the person who turns about because I've got 3 guys I've got to work against. And
so let's take another quick break. Okay. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Arkansas Senator Miss Joyce Elliott, who is running for the U.S. Representative in Arkansas' 2nd Congressional District against incumbent Mr. French Hill. Still to come, if elected, her plans for Congress. What does she dream about doing? And what are her policies? I also want to let you know that if you have a question for our guest, stay tuned. The hotline number when we come back. You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy. I'm speaking today with Arkansas Senator Miss Joyce Elliott, who is running for U.S. Representative in Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District against incumbent Mr. French Hill. If you have a question or a comment for Miss Elliott, you may call.
The number you can call is 501-823-0965. That's 501-823-0965.
Joyce Elliott, you have many passions, and I believe, after talking to you for the last 30 minutes, education, child care, pre-K are among your top. And on your website, you list policies. You have policy listings that you have posted your stance on, and they are, I'm just going to run through them real quick, and then we'll talk about your favorite. Healthcare, economy, veterans, infrastructure, education, COVID-19. Isn't that interesting? That's a policy now. That's interesting. I thought, wow. Labor, agriculture, environment and energy, and public service reform. I especially liked that one when I read it. But Which one are you the most passionate about and is the most important to you, and why? And I can probably guess, but you tell me.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a caller. Hold on a minute.
It's a natural thing. Okay.
Hold on. Is Jeff on the line?
Okay.
Jeff, do you have a question for Joyce?
Yes. You said that you were a prior teacher. Where do you stand on the 1619 project?
I don't know necessarily. You might need to help me with that some. But as far as the 1619 project being something that's a worthy thing to do, I think it is absolutely something that we should take a look at. Because one of the things, I know it's been controversial with people because we were all taught our history in a particular way. And anytime our history gets added to, and I think it's valid that we learn things that we need to learn to make sure we are learning all of our history. I don't think it's anything that anybody has to do, but we should learn all the perspectives and know more about our history than we knew today.
What is the 1619? What is 16? Tell our listeners what that is. I don't even know what y'all are talking about. What is the 1619 project?
It is a project that's headed by, I've lost her name, McCoy. But it's a project that went back to take a look at our history from 1619, the day the slaves arrived, here on the continent. And what it does is, if you think back to your history, I'll think back to my history, we didn't learn very much about what the perspectives were and what life was like for those people who were slaves, and in turn did not learn much about people who were descended from those slaves in most of our history. And so it was a Pulitzer Prize winning endeavor. And it became very controversial because it's a sensitive issue. Anytime you talk about race, and so many times, we've been told all of our lives we shouldn't talk about race, and why, and because it's too sensitive. But we don't learn about each other when we don't. And so it was a project to try to fill in some of those gaps. And for a lot of people, it really became, a point of controversy.
All right, we've got another phone call. Okay. Oh, never mind. I'm sorry. They just hung up. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Joyce.
I was just going to say, as a teacher and just as a person, I love learning about other people and being empathetic to other people's point of view. And that was all I was going to say. And I'm so sorry it became controversial because,
Yep. I love documentaries too, and it doesn't really matter what it's about. I like watching any kind of documentaries because, like I said, I'm dyslexic. I don't read. I love watching a documentary or being taught something. Let's talk about your passion. So, healthcare, economy, veterans, infrastructure, education, COVID-19, labor, agriculture, environment, energy, public service reform. What do you think we should do about education in pre-K?
Well, I think we need to determine exactly how great we want to be in our country, period. And a part of that to me means creating world-class educations everywhere for all kids, no matter where they live, and that they all have access to a world-class education. And that's so important to me because as we keep telling our students, you have to perform on a world stage. And it's just wrong to keep telling them that and not prepare them in a way that they can perform in a global world. And so the way I think it will matter in Congress is that we need to very carefully become partners with the states. And so if the state wanted to create a world-class education system, then we need to work out ways so that Congress could work with those states because it's too much to ask of states alone. I think that is just so crucial. And a part of that world-class education means getting a great start in the early years, because right now in Arkansas, we have a good pre-K system that we're not funding as we should. But it is something that we need to take a look at, like the countries that are the highest performing countries in the world. The very first thing they do is make sure all kids are off to a great start so that you cannot determine where they live and determine what their educational outcomes are going to be. And as a part of that, with pre-K through K-12, We need to be sure if a student, wants to get a college education, we need to make sure that there is a way for them to do it, and there's a way for you to do it that is not going to be so onerous. But if we are going to have, a world-class country and maintain it, our education system needs to be thought about, as pre-K all the way through college.
And this harkens back to going to the source of a problem. We always want to go to the end results and go, why are these kids not going to college, and why are we not getting good jobs, and why is the unemployment rate high? Well, we're addressing the problem at the end rather than starting at the very beginning.
Yes, and we almost end up punishing people because we didn't start at the beginning. And because the last part of that world-class system is the e-school system, to make sure, in addition to higher ed, as we normally think about it, we should have world-class career tech systems as well. That's what these other countries are doing. And a four-year degree is not considered better than a career tech degree. And many times, even in these other systems, they go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who might a four-year degree might decide there's something over in the career tech side I'd like to do. And it's not thought of as a two-tier system in these other countries. But we tend to think about career tech. Some people are just good with their hands. That's not what career tech is. You're good with your brains too, and I always hate it when I hear it described that way.
I think you could call me a graduate of career tech. I went to a VOTEC school, and it was one of the best educations I've ever got. Let's talk about public service reform. I like the things you said about public service reform. Hit the highlights on that.
And I'm not going to remember them all because I'm not looking at it, but one of the things that is so difficult to do, is to make sure, we have all these ideas, and, among the things about the revolving door that allows, Congress to just come right out and be lobbyists when they retire. I think there needs to be some time between those two things where it's really significant, because when you do that, if you've been a congressperson, you're just automatically, you're going to have some authority that you would not have had if you just had kind of a cooling off period. And I think that's really important. And for I think we just need to eliminate dark money. These groups that lobby Congress, if you're going to lobby Congress, it just needs to be transparent. Everybody needs to know what's going to the members of Congress. But as long as it's dark money, you don't know who's influencing whom, or at least trying. And the other thing I'm remembering is lobbyist activities for disclosure. And so many lobbyists, so many things they do are not disclosed, and we don't have an apparatus to make sure we know what lobbyists are doing in many cases.
Isn't a lobbyist just somebody who bribes the Senate? I don't understand why that ever came about. I don't get that at all. Why that's legal?
No, the way it came about actually was, there are people who wanted to have some influence, especially for big corporations. Generally, not for just average people like us. And so there were the well-to-do folks, the big, barons, who went to Washington, and I think it was a Willard Hotel where a lot of the meetings took place. It's a very swanky hotel. And these folks literally hung out in the lobby and waited for the Congress people to emerge from their meetings. And that's how they got to be called lobbyists. They were influencers.
In the lobby, hung out in the lobby. That's a good story.
Yeah, and that's why they're called lobbyists.
I just want to take a minute and say you're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy, and I'm speaking today with Arkansas Senator Miss Joyce Elliott, who is running for the U.S. Representative in Arkansas' 2nd Congressional District. All right, we've only got 10 minutes left, so this is just personal for me. You donated a kidney to your sister. Is it Gloria?
Yes.
Is Gloria her name?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Gloria.
Tell us how that came about, and I want to know if there are lifestyle modifications that have to be made after such a procedure.
Uh-huh. And that's such a good question, that last part, because people always wonder about that. Well, my sister, who is the youngest of our 5 girls, And we didn't have any particular reason. We don't know what happened, but her kidneys were just attacked by a very aggressive kidney disease. And it has a big long name, but I don't even remember. And they tried very hard, to treat it, but there was no reversing it. And so she was on dialysis for a while, for about a year, just a little bit over a year. And so we have a large family, and all of us got tested. And as it turned out, we were all a match. It was just uncanny. But it turns out I was the perfect match because I was the healthiest of everybody. I didn't smoke. I was a runner, and I ate good food and whatnot. So when all of us met and found out, we were, a decent match, we had a discussion. And so everybody agreed, and this will surprise you, everybody agreed, Joyce, since you have the best lifestyle and you're the healthiest and so forth, we all think it should be you. Oh, yeah, of course you do, so it won't be you. But it was not. But it was, because, I love my sister, and it was not a big deal to do it because I talked with doctors, we studied it and not studied it and all that, and so I knew it would not endanger my health. But I decided to do it, and the day we had the surgery, my sister actually got up and walked into my room where we were in different rooms, and she walked into my room, and I said, "What are you doing up walking around already?" "Oh, my kidney's already working." And I'm still lying there in the bed because I'm cut from here to here. And so it was very successful right away. And this was the same time, too, by the way, when I was running for office and I was still teaching. And I went back to school that year. The surgery was in late July. Mid-July, because I went back to school pretty early in August. And, it was almost, I had sick leave days, but I didn't have enough to use those days and still have some if something else happened, And so I thought I just need to go back, and I had to, make this decision between personal health and, which, had I answered your questions of which one of these things is my biggest passion, right now it is healthcare. And I think at that point is when it became so incredibly a part of anything about having a decent life. And so, and I'm a walking pre-existing condition because of that. And I have not had to change my lifestyle. People need to know it is perfectly safe to do. This is one of the things. I guess there's a reason we have two of them. Because I have not, my life has just gone on as usual.
You'd like to expand the Affordable Care Act. You'd like to stand up to prescription and drug price gouging. You'd like to make Washington work for small states with COVID-19 relief and resources. You'd like to help with Medicaid expansion, do more for rural hospitals that are uninsured. That seems like a pretty important one. And protect Social Security and Medicare so that seniors don't lose affordable coverage.
Yes, yeah. I had one of the things about the Affordable Care Act was really what it did in rural areas and not closing hospitals. That was a big deal for a lot of folks. But I had that experience, though, much earlier because in Nevada County where I grew up, I believe it was maybe 1996 or so. I wasn't still living there, but my mother was still there, and my other family members, my sister and my brother and several cousins. But our hospital had closed a long time before the affordable health care came along. And I knew what that meant. So I know for people, oftentimes we assume transportation is available for people, and many times it's not. And a part of any, I would guess you would say in any kind of community or town, they might even think about it as a county with any kind of high quality of life. You need to have a hospital, and they're small, and they're not specialties, but they certainly are a step between you and critical care if you have to come to say UAMS or something. So far in all of your accomplishments, and there are many. I mean, we've scratched the surface. What are you most proud of, and what do you think your legacy will be? I think probably because it's so important to getting a great start is what I was able to do to help with pre-K. Because at the time, we need to get back to that. We had the number one pre-K in this nation, the number one, right here in Arkansas.
Really?
And yes, we did. We ticked all the boxes for being number one because we started out that way. We started out very intentionally because keep in mind, this is when, after we had been sued, the Lakeview case we talked about for adequacy for education. Pre-K is not in the Constitution, but it's grades 1 through 12, that is. And so we were spending all this money and making sure we met the court order. And it made no sense, we thought, if we don't invest in kids, in the lower ages, and to have them more ready when they get to K-12. And so it was one of the best investments we could have made, in the humans that we depend on, to make sure we have.
What are we now? What is our pre-K rank now?
Well, the last time I think I know we're lower. I don't know the exact number, but the reason we are lowered is because we are not funding it as we should, and we have students who don't have access. What our goal was and what we were working toward was universal, not man-made, not a universal mandate, but universal access for every parent who wanted, their kids, all the parents who wanted their kids to get that great start, especially if they were not able to do that, because many parents are. This
is your last question. When you're lying in bed dreaming, and I know you do because everybody does, and you see yourself in Washington and you're daydreaming about it, what does that daydream look like?
It looks like a group of people who come from all different corners of this country who can put aside whatever their leanings are, and they are working together to represent everybody in this country. That we are a mosaic of thought that can create the mosaic of that can represent all the different kind of people in our mosaic in our country, no matter who they are. Because I really take it to heart, United States of America. So my dream is that is exactly what we'll be working toward, to make sure everybody have the opportunity to pursue happiness and be a united country.
I've really enjoyed speaking with you so much. Thank you so much for taking time to visit with me. You are on the run. You are busy all the time. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. I want to say...
Go ahead.
Oh, just thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I thank you too, and I assume it's okay to ask people to go to joyceelliott.com and learn more about our campaign. I would really appreciate that, because I think the more you learn, the more you will sign up for this campaign.
Spoken like a real teacher. In closing, to our listeners, I want to thank you for spending time with us. We hope you've heard or learned something that's been inspiring or enlightening, and that whatever it is, will help you up your business, your independence, or your life. I'm Kerry McCoy, and I'll see you next time on Up in Your Business. Until then, be brave and keep it up.
If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the picture of Kerry's face in the center of the screen. For more of Kerry's interviews, click either video on the right of the screen. And as always, thank you for watching.